Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Rectified Podcast. My guest today is Vivian McCormick, founder of Wilet, and we're going to let Vivian tell us all about it. Vivian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the obvious question. What is Wilet?
Okay, so Wilet is a premium home essentials brand that's helping you make room for rest. So our primary product is 100% linen bedding. That's what we started with 6 years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
we have now grown our product out into some more assortment of lines, including a bath line. But really, we're focused on things that can make you help you get rest and restoration in your home.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Vivian, tell us a little bit more about your background. What did you do, and how did you come to Wilet mainly?
Yeah, I mean, I think much like a lot of other founders, I probably have a fairly winding path, maybe more so than others.
Yeah.
I became an entrepreneur a little bit later in my career. I spent about 10 years first practicing law. So I was a
Yeah.
lawyer working at a big firm here in Canada and practicing in the area of banking and insolvency. And then I went to work for the BDC. So
Mm,
I got to work for the bank that supports entrepreneurs in
yes.
Canada. So that was a really nice eye-opening experience for me to get to work more closely with entrepreneurs.
Mm,
I worked in private practice. I was mostly supporting the lending institutions as opposed
mm-hmm.
to borrowers. So I got to see a little bit more when I got to the BDC about what entrepreneurs were struggling with and what was working, and I got to help support by making sure that they could access capital. So I
Yeah.
did that for about 5 years, and then I sort of got this inclination to want to help entrepreneurs more directly as opposed to just via the BDC. And so I started doing a lot of consulting, mostly with female founders as it happened, and
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of things across the board. Scope was fairly wide, but a lot of times it was making sure that they had their operations sort of dialed to the point where when they did need financing, they could access it. That's
Mm,
the thing that I kept seeing as the struggle was that when entrepreneurs need financing, sometimes it's too
true.
when they
True.
finally they get it and they don't have things organized. And, I would say 5 years into the business now as an entrepreneur myself, I understand how they get there.
Mm,
I
mm,
understand how
mm,
hard it is now. And so that was part of it as I was consulting and um one of my co-founders, I have two other co-founders, Anna and Juana. One of my co-founders, Anna, came to us with this idea, and it was based on the usual story that entrepreneurs have. They had a need for themselves, and they wondered
mm,
why isn't anybody else doing this? And that need for her was wanting to find natural fiber bedding, linen in particular, that
mm.
was sold here in Canada that wasn't costing the same price as the mattress she just purchased. Because
Yeah.
go to the box stores, that is actually what she was encountering, and so
True.
we went and looked, and there was a little bit, but not much. Most of it was out of the country, and so by the time you paid duties and shipping, it was just unpredictable what it was going to cost you. Um, so, instead of just deciding to buy from one of those, we decided to order 200 sets of bedding and sell them to people. And so when that happened, when she brought that idea to us, part of me was really, as a consultant, also wanting to understand a little bit more closely what entrepreneurs grapple with every day.
Yeah.
So that's how the three of us, decided to start this.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you been doing this?
So we started in 2017.
Mm,
We launched our website April of 2018.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, what skills from your past, from law, from BDC, you talked about BDC a little bit, did you bring to the table?
Well, I think it's funny because lawyers by nature are typically more risk averse people.
Mm,
And so
true.
when you ask what skills I brought, I certainly brought some baggage too. That's the first thing I think about. But I did, um, I the law and working in law has you thinking about things in a very analytical way. Um,
Mm,
so I I quite often approach things with a lot of curiosity and asking questions and trying to figure out just problem solving, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
much of being a founder is just what fires are you putting out today?
Exactly.
How? And and I think maybe there was a bit of strategy as well that would come from kind of looking at a file,
Mm.
trying to figure out the best way to proceed. So I think those are some of the skill sets.
Yeah.
Naturally, working in law also, you end up with a pretty high capacity for workload.
Yeah.
So, the irony is I remember moving from private practice to working for the BDC, and the lifestyle changed a lot.
Mm.
Hours were much less when you work
Yes.
for a crown corporation, and there is a lot of balance, which was really lovely.
Mhm.
And when I came back to being an entrepreneur, you cannot help but do it 24/7.
Yes.
You just can't
Yes.
stop thinking about it. It's natural. And so the irony now is I think I probably work more than I ever did as a lawyer, but it's something different.
Yeah.
And so my capacity for workload is pretty high. I would say I brought that into
Mm.
business. And maybe that's, again, maybe that's actually baggage because I
Yeah.
think there's a world where uh, and I guess starting later in my career, I see these days that there are entrepreneurs who have a lot more balance and are a
True.
lot better at making sure that they take time to rest.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and I think as somebody who's a bit older and comes from a little bit of a different time when we were
Yes.
working,
Yes.
I just have this. I just can't really turn it off. And you know what? I really I love work. I do
Yeah.
like to work. And I maintain healthy lots of relationships outside of this. I have a family. I have a young son, and so
Mm.
there's definitely a lot of balancing happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do fit in a lot of time for work. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably one that that's
Yeah,
one that
it's interesting what you said because it's true that the younger generation, they're really following a lot of people on social media, and on social media, there's a lot of talk about taking care of yourself and balance, the balance and all of that, and they grew up on this. While
yeah.
the previous generations, it was like you should work, you should achieve, it was more about the work and less about yourself.
Yeah.
Um, I was wondering, like, entrepreneurship in general is not something that people praise. Like at the beginning, people always say, "Oh my God, these are crazy people. They're trying to sell I don't know what." Or maybe in your case, "Oh my God, she was a lawyer. Like, is she crazy? Is she going to sell sheets? Like, what is she doing?" Did that happen with you, and how did you navigate through that?
So it's kind of funny. I think at the time in 2016, 2017, when I started to sort of pay more attention to entrepreneurship, I actually think that we were in a moment where entrepreneurship actually was being really celebrated. So
Okay.
there were podcasts, I listened to the startup podcast, I listened to how
Mm,
I built this, I listened to all of these podcasts, and I feel like
yeah.
there was a lot of storytelling that really told you the exciting stories about entrepreneurship
Mm,
and that celebration.
mm,
Do you think there's been a pretty big shift,
yeah.
especially amongst women founders, let's say,
Mhm.
where you are hearing more about the realities of entrepreneurship, which I think is important because,
True.
you know, I don't think that we were naive per se about what it would be like, but I do think that I appreciate now people being very real about it.
Mm,
For my own particular story, yes, of course. I mean, there were definitely people who thought it was great to be getting out of law, and there were also people who probably less, more
mm,
quietly thought, "Not really sure what she's doing here." But,
yeah.
you know, yeah, 2 sides of the coin for sure.
Mm,
And I think there was a big community shift for me when we started this business. We were very fortunate to quickly find a lot of people who were in our city and abroad doing, starting businesses or a few years ahead of
yeah.
us. They were
Mm,
everybody was so open with their information and their learning,
mm,
right? And so I
yeah.
quickly found a community of people who were everybody was in the same boat, and a lot of them
Mm,
big corporate jobs as well. And so I was able to find that commonality with people quite quickly. And I still have a lot of friends from when I was in law school and practicing law,
Yeah.
and generally speaking, when I see them, they're all like, "Oh, this is so great that you're doing this." And
Mm.
yeah, sure,
Yeah.
it is. It's not easy.
No.
Sometimes I long for the days of, frankly, doing a job that I know how to do. A lot of show up to work
Yes.
nowadays and you think, I have no idea what to do with that, but
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
figure it
Yeah.
out. That's
Yeah.
the job. That's my job.
True.
Um, so yeah, it's not a grass is greener on the other
Yeah.
side thing, but it's funny when you've seen both and you think, okay, I
Mm.
understand. I understand the pluses and negatives of both now. I have a very
Yeah.
realistic. So it's a little bit celebration and then it's
Mm.
a lot of pragmatism too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever like think about, oh my God, I studied all these years and I did all those exams. Like, how did I get here? Like, what happened? Like, you
Ah,
completely reinvented yourself. It's like your whole identity is a different person now.
very different. It's very different. I don't think about necessarily I don't see any of it as having been something I shouldn't have done. Um,
Mm.
Again, my legal education has me thinking about things. I've always told people that I think
Yeah.
differently because of my legal education. And I think what I bring, going back to that skill set piece, I think I bring risk evaluation to the
Mm.
table.
Yeah.
So while I had to move a little bit more along the spectrum to be a little bit more risk taking. I know that I'm also well versed in risk assessment
Mm.
because
Mm.
that's what I had to do all the time for other people. Now it's just
True.
for us, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I had the safety blanket of being able to risk assess and tell people, here are the options, and then let someone else decide. But
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, it's risk assess and then also make the decision. And then if the decision is not good, then I'm going to
Yes.
live.
You're
So
responsible.
yeah, and so I think, the education part, I don't, that part serves me well. And the other thing
Mm.
that I remember when even before starting the business, even when I decided to go and do more consulting and contract work outside of law, I also
Yeah.
knew that it's not, it's not irreversible, right?
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
also knew that, listen, nobody can take my law degree away from me.
True.
If I ever need to go back to practice or if I ever want to go back to practice, I knew
Mm.
that I
Yeah.
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 Well, I do see again, this is a super winding path. This is a very
Mm.
long life. I one thing I know for sure nowadays is that I can barely tell you what's going to happen next week, next month,
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
year. It's so hard. That's the part that I actually have to get okay with because
Mm.
I think when you go and pursue a legal career, you do
Yeah.
assume that you're going to be on a fairly linear path.
Mm. Yeah.
And I've definitely veered off that path,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. For sure.
but now I'm just thinking through, do I need to get back on that path? What does that look like in the future? But I can't
Yeah.
tell you because who
Mm.
knows? Who
Yeah.
knows what will
Yeah.
happen? Yeah.
That's definitely entrepreneurship. Everything you just said defines entrepreneurship. Let's move from the personal now and go back to Willet.
Yes.
Um, you bought these sheets and you decided to like sell them. Who
Mhm.
was the first client who bought from you who's not like family or friend or anyone you know?
It was a lot of family and friends. The best part about the beginning of this business was that we did have a lot of people, there's 3 of us co-founders. We have
Mm.
fairly extensive networks. Again, we started the business further into our careers when frankly we had a lot of people in our community who had the means to go and
Yeah.
buy and invest in linen bedding. So we were speaking to our demographic. We
Mm.
knew our demographic quite well. And, the funny thing is that people definitely purchased the first set from us, I think, just to support us personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So great. The funny thing is that, a little while later when they decided that they loved the product, they were coming back for another purchase. And that's
Mm.
when they were admitting to us that the first time they just bought to support us. Now they actually love them, so they want more. And I
Yeah.
thought, I'm gonna take that as a compliment, I think. Uh,
Yes.
but that so it was a lot of family and friends.
Mm.
Other funny story is that Anna at the time was the manager of one of the busiest cafes in downtown Vancouver.
Mm.
She had many, 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 many regular customers. And I remember when we started the business, on launch day, she was telling everybody as they bought their coffee, okay,
Yeah.
you
You
need to
should
also
buy
add
sheep.
it. Yeah. Yeah. And so some of those, I didn't personally know them, but she had been, they had been her customers for a very long time.
Yeah.
Our third co-founder, Juana, and I were her customers. That's how we all became friends. That's how we
Mm. Mm.
so that cafe holds a very near and
Yeah.
dear place for us. And then it was I do remember the shift too in that
Mm.
you watch every order that comes through and you
Yeah.
see every name. And I do remember at some point we stopped recognizing the names. And that was
Mm.
and then I further remember when we started to recognize the customer names because they were coming back over and over again, but we didn't know them. Like they don't know, we
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they've come through our showroom and we get to meet them in person, but a lot of them we don't know, but we know their name. And
Wow.
you're actually sometimes really surprised when, if we do meet them in person, we know them already by name. We know what their order was and they're very surprised, but it's because some of them, their LTV is
Mm.
incredible.
Mm.
Thousands of dollars. And, we're
Wow.
very grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
tells us it tells us we've got a great product.
Exactly. If they're
Yeah.
coming back, it means they love it.
Yeah, and so, most of the time the thing that we think through is, how do we get back to increasing our acquisition of
Yeah.
new customers? Because once we have them, we actually know that the repeat rate is over
Mm.
3%.
Yeah.
And for a product like ours that's not a consumable, I think that's very high.
Yes.
And
You don't
so
buy sheets every day.
oh, you don't. They
Yeah.
actually the repeat purchase rate is higher than I assumed it would be
Mm.
at the outset, but we're
Pretty amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You talked about acquisition. What are you doing? Like, we know they love the product, they're coming back, but what are you doing to bring new people or to spread the word about your
Yeah.
brand?
Yeah, so we started in 2018. A lot of it was own community and just kind of our network. And then we started running a little bit of digital advertising, but not that
Hmm.
much.
Yeah.
We built our email list and we at the outset I remember we actually were really reluctant to offer any manner of a discount to get an email list together, right?
Yeah.
First purchase, we didn't want to do it. And then we had some, really smart people around us who said, "Listen, that is that cost of acquisition is way lower than anything you're going to do in ads." And they're right.
Yeah.
An email list is our most valuable
Mm.
asset, really, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then so then we actually got a very organic boost in acquisition when the pandemic started.
Mm.
Uh, Everybody at home, captive on their phone,
Yes.
wanting to improve their home. So I would say we got this real tailwind at that,
Hmm.
and acquisition was frankly not hard. And then we come out of that where people are starting to redistribute their budgets again. And so acquisition definitely slowed down compared to that period of
Yeah.
time. And so but I think also, in 21 and 22, a lot of people, us included, were still sort of trying to figure out how to unlock it again on digital
Mm.
with digital ads. And
Yeah.
I think we knew that it was definitely not as efficient. And yet, what
You
else?
did it
Knew that
anyway.
the ROI, right? And you're watching the platform performance and, frankly, if you now we do really look at true attribution, it
Yeah.
is, not at all what the platforms are reporting. So I think we got into a bit of a feedback, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and
Were
then
there sorry, go
no,
on.
I was just going to round out to say that in 2023 we rebranded.
Hmm.
And I have to say, the rebrand is something that we're so proud of, and we actually love, 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 love the new direction we're taking. And we think that it's the one that we get to take as a legacy brand, right? And to build
Mm.
a legacy.
Mm.
That said, acquisition got even tougher because
Mm.
people, our most engaged audience knew what was happening. But when you are trying to speak to a new audience
Yeah.
and get acquisition, I think it's an uphill battle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
now we're back to working that out again.
Yeah. Were
Yeah.
there any like failed attempts, money wasted, you spend on things that you shouldn't have done, like a lot on, I don't know, Facebook ads, or I don't know what I'm saying, anything.
Yeah. Well, I would say that when I compare what we've just done, we're recording this right
Mm-hmm.
on Black Friday 2023.
Yes.
What I know is that we scaled right back for digital ads in 2023. We utilized other other opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
get the word out um, than 2022. And 2022, I would say, we were in that, we were stuck. We were stuck a little bit on putting a lot of money towards ads, hoping that that would work for
Mm-hmm.
acquisition. And then,
Yeah.
really didn't prove out that way. So I
Mm.
would say if there was anything that I was, we look back on it, but we've learned from it. We look back and we learned this year that that was not the way we were going to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's a little hard to yeah, it's so hard to measure so much ROI of
Yeah.
so many different things,
Mm.
right? So I do believe that we have to get into looking at other medium, more email newsletter
Yeah.
sponsorship, more podcast sponsorship, all of these aspects. But
Yeah.
it's so hard to say it's money wasted because you're filling the top of the funnel, and so you just don't know if that's the case. I think if I was, if there was to be money, if there is money wasted, I think it's that if you are going to make all those efforts that you're not doing it in a concerted way, that you
Mm.
actually see a halo effect of a bunch of things you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it can be hard if you do one at a time, you might not see anything and you
No,
oh,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Nowadays, it's more like that. It's like all the little efforts that you do that are combined together into giving you the result. It's very interesting what you said about spending on ads and spending less nowadays, because I see a lot of people, like people on this podcast, or people I talk to, or people I work with,
Yeah.
they focus only on spending money on ads, especially on Instagram and Facebook, and that's where all their revenue is from. And it's
Yeah.
very interesting that in your situation, it's the complete opposite, and you're
Yeah.
looking into alternative methods to bring in the revenue.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of that, when you first started, did you speaking of money, let's say, when
Yeah.
you first started, when
Sure.
you first started, did you like finance it yourself, or did you use, your connections, your BDC skills, like, all everything that you know in terms of financing to get started?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's actually something I'm really passionate about talking
Mm,
about,
mm,
because I encounter a lot, especially, again, female founders or female founders, aspiring female founders who
yes.
often say, "Oh, I really wanna I have this great idea, but I can't it's gonna take me forever to save the money to start the business." And I always,
Hmm.
"Why are you using all your own money?" And they just
Yeah.
don't necessarily consider that there's another option, and there's actually many options, right? So when we started, yeah, my banking background told me that, "Hey, listen, if this is a business that is worth funding, then we
Mm,
should try to leverage capital from somewhere else, knowing
yeah.
that if we are successful, it gets paid back, right? And so why put all of your own money into it if you can leverage?" And frankly, we wouldn't have been able to necessarily pull together that money the seed
Mm,
start. The other piece of our own personal journey is that when it started, I um, had been working a lot in the fundraising realm, actually,
mm,
for other founders.
yeah.
And so having seen what it was like to raise capital from in an equity perspective from investors, I was kind of more of the view that that's not the way we should go. Also, when you're starting something, you worry about whether or not you're going to be like taking on investors was scary. Taking
Mm,
on a small bank loan made more sense to me anyway, and
yeah.
to my co-founders.
Yes.
So that's how we did it. Is we decided, no, let's go and get a small loan. So we actually we sought out a loan from Futurepreneur,
Yeah.
a wonderful resource,
Yeah.
and we were at the time young enough to access that capital. Not anymore. But I remember saying, listen, you guys, if we're going to do this, let's do this right now because we are at an age where we can still access capital from Futurepreneur. And Futurepreneur had a wonderful partnership at the time with Women's Enterprise Center, which is now called
Mm,
WeBC. So
yeah.
again, I was thinking through opportunities to borrow money that perhaps were not the traditional chartered banks, because I also knew
Yeah.
that our business model might be something that chartered banks were not comfortable with.
Yeah.
So
True.
that's how we started. And
Mm,
then, transparently, because I had only recently left BDC, they weren't an option. It was just a
yeah.
conflict.
Yeah. Yeah.
Couldn't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we started the business, and because it was profitable from day one, consistently grew, we were able then to go and get financing from the BDC for the next
Okay.
round of growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's how we did it. We did it with debt all the way up until 2022, and then we did a small friends and family round in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you thinking in the future to go big, like some VCs or like, the big investors?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Again, it's so hard to see into that crystal ball to know what you.
Mm,
But what
yeah.
I do know is that aside from what's happening with us, you can see a very, very shifting landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So I think gone are the days where consumer brands could be invested in with top line being the only manner of concern.
Yeah.
Now, all the investors are driving towards profitability, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so businesses need to have a sustainable growth model that also is growing fast enough for VCs. And I frankly,
Mm,
that's kind of hard, right?
yes. True.
And also it's hard when the goalposts get moved on you in the middle of the business. I mean, goalposts are being moved all the time, but when it comes to,
Mm,
figuring out what metrics should I be trying to focus
yeah.
on for fundraising, when they shift, all of a sudden you're on your foot trying to fix,
Yeah.
take a look at all those different ones. So, when we started the business, I think actually we figured that might be the trajectory. Let's,
Mm,
start, then we'll probably raise to get, you know, bigger and bigger and bigger, and then ultimately we would exit, we would sell.
yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that's off the table. I
Okay.
just think with no crystal ball that it will be done
Yeah.
different.
Okay.
I think it
Are
will be
you attached to your brand like a baby? Speaking of exit.
totally. Yeah, yes. I think we are, but I also think, I am very pragmatic.
Okay.
I always tell people too, when you start a business, it's also important to know what your end
Mm,
goal is, right? And
mm,
some people don't think that way because they think I'm just going to start the business and see what happens. And I
yeah.
think, I understand why, because none of us can predict, but I do think it's important to know what you want to do with it. And because we
True.
always knew that, you know, we're probably not going to sell bedding for our entire lives, the rest of my
Mm,
career, I
mm,
think I care about it I care about it so much and inherently, never stop thinking about it.
yeah.
It is kind of actually like having a kid now that I do have one, because again, you're raising it
Yes.
to be able to go off and do its own thing. So I
Exactly.
think I can think about the brand that way too. I can say, well, I do think there was a point where it can probably grow and thrive without us. And it can
Mm,
grow and thrive with people who have more experience to help it at that stage of the business. That's what
yeah.
I see happening.
Okay.
So yes, I am absolutely attached to it, but I'm attached to it in a way that I'm trying to raise it so that it,
Yes.
one day stand on its own.
Love this. Vivian, Vivian, we're towards the end of this episode, and I usually ask 3 questions for our guests. They're the same questions. Are you ready to answer them?
Okay, let's do it.
How would your friends describe what you do for a living?
um, I hope they would say that I sell rest.
Okay. All right. Question number 2. What is one thing that your products did to someone that you didn't expect?
Oh my goodness. I am always really happy to hear when people say that we have improved their sleep,
Mm,
because this has been an incredible last 5 years. And I think a lot of people have struggled
Yeah.
more recently, to
True.
sleep. And the effects that that has on people is
Mm,
it cascades, it's exponential. And so anytime somebody says to us truly that we help them with that and that the product helped them with that, I'm grateful to hear
mm,
that because
mm.
it is so important and it's just that little contribution that we can have. Back to your first question when people ask
Yes.
what I do, I think the other thing that I would say is that we've always really worked to foster a community. And so whether that
Mm,
community is our customers who are seeing an improvement in their lives, our founder community who are, we're contributing to, that is what I do every day is to
mm,
figure out how
mm.
to keep moving the dial forward on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Question number 3. Is there a book that changed your life that you would recommend to our audience?
Oh my goodness.
If it's not a book, it can be like a podcast or something.
I will take it back to the startup podcast. So startup was about actually season one was about the start of a podcast, right? And
Yeah.
how that looked. Um, and I remember I listened to it very in quick succession. I listened to the seasons very quickly, and I just it started to open my mind up to
Mm,
other ideas and what I
yeah.
could be doing to help people. So I would think that's the one that really is a catalyst to some of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Um, I should go back and listen again actually because I'm sure I would
Good.
hear it so differently now.
Exactly. With
No.
all your experiences and
Yeah.
everything that
Yeah.
happened.
I might say some of those things are like, oh, that was totally not right. Like that, that's blown up. But I think for the most part, that's what got me to take that next. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Vivian, where can we find Wilet and where do you ship? Like in which countries?
Oh yeah. So we do ship worldwide, but primarily right now, Canada and the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Are at shopwillet.com. So shopwilet.com. That is also our Instagram handle, at shopwillet. Uh, um, TikTok as well is at shopwillet.
Yeah.
We are also, as a D2C brand, we are also on marketplaces like Indigo, Simons. Simons is a fantastic marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
I think the demographics
Yeah.
really mesh well.
Yeah.
Um, so we are there. We are in the US on the knot.com for wedding registries, which actually is a
Mm-hmm.
nice as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, so we do ship directly if you're buying from our website. And most recently we've put our linen cotton blend collection of bedding up at Amazon as well. So
Mm.
yeah,
All
so
right.
continue to grow those marketplaces and see where we can
Yeah.
find some traction.
Yeah. All right. You're going to send me all those links so that I put it in the
Yeah.
description of the podcast. Thank you, Vivian, for being a guest. And to all the listeners, I'll be back next week with a new episode.